So hopefully everyone's week is going great. It's Thursday, so we are officially over the hump. To kick off this session, I'd actually like to start by posing a quick question, which is, have you ever been in a Miro board and wished for a specific feature or a capability that didn't exist natively in Miro? Well, if you have, that's actually precisely where Miro apps come in. And more specifically, the Miro Developer Platform, which is a way to kind of expand on the capabilities and use cases that are already possible in Miro. And before we jump in, I'm going to first turn the music off. And then, before we jump in, just a quick note about me. So for those of you new to the developer community, my name is Will Bishop, and I'm a staff developer advocate here at Miro. I'm really passionate about, all things web development and product. And yeah, that's why I'm really excited to dive into our web SDK today and show you all how you can create an awesome Miro app of your own. And specifically today, we'll be working with drag and drop. So yeah, what are we building today? Well, in this session, I'm going to focus on building a basic Miro drag and drop app that's accessible from within a Miro board. And we'll build this using our SDK. So for those of you who are new to the Miro platform, this webinar assumes little prior knowledge of our developer capabilities, but that's not to say that it won't also be helpful for those of you who might already have some knowledge of the platform, of course, but we'll get into some examples and inspiration later as well. So first, just a quick overview of what we'll be, discussing. So first, I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about the Miro Developer Platform, which we'll be using. Then I'm going to dive into some of the finer details around our local environment setup and creating a boilerplate app from the command line. And then we're going to raise a few points about the Miro Web SDK and development. And then I'll walk you through some example Web SDK methods and how to style a Miro app. And afterwards, we're going to have a little bit of time for community inspiration and then, of course, Q&A. So to ground today's session, I would like to take a moment to introduce Miro's developer platform, which refers to the combined power of our Web SDK, REST APIs, and Live Embed. So today, we're going to be focusing exclusively on our Web SDK, which comes as no surprise. But although we won't get into too much detail on our REST API and Live Embed capabilities, which are some other capabilities we have, for those of you who are curious, you might consider these for use cases around integrating Miro with a third party or embedding Miro directly on a web page, respectively. So all three of our main capabilities, they live separately from each other, but just keep in mind that these could be and often are used in combination to build creative solutions that leverage one, two, or maybe all three of them. So with that in mind, let's actually jump straight to the Web SDK. So a bit more detail on our Web SDK. This is a JavaScript-based library that is accessible from directly within your browser's developer console on an open Miro board. But we also offer an NPM package to be able to create a new Web SDK app directly from your command line, which we'll do shortly. But what does a Web SDK app look like? You might be wondering. Well, the look and feel of an SDK app is going to vary depending on the styling and functionality that you might be using, but you'll find all SDK apps living in an app panel on the left-hand side of a Miro board. So these apps can all have their own, custom UI, modals, and more, and you can access these directly from the left-hand toolbar on a Miro board. All right, so let's actually dive in, starting with getting our local environment up and running for our Miro application. So what do you need for this? Well, as long as you have a Miro account and an IDE, you can follow along as I create a developer team and an app in Miro. So for this, I'm actually going to go over to my terminal within my code editor, and I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. And we're going to use the npm create-miro package. So we'll start by using the command, which is npx create-miro-app at latest. And you want to append the at latest to this command so that you know you're getting the latest version of our npm package. And then this is going to ask us just a few questions. It's going to ask us what we want to name our app. And for this, I'll just call it June webinar. And then it's going to give us a selection of frameworks that we can use for our application. So we've got React, we've got vanilla JavaScript, Vue, we have a Node client library if you're using our REST API. And then we also have like a Next.js framework that includes our Web SDK and REST API capabilities kind of baked into one boilerplate. But for today's purposes, since I'm using the Web SDK and I'm not worried about a backend or anything like that, I'm just going to go ahead and use plain vanilla JavaScript. And after I choose my framework, I can also select a language. So here we've got a choice between TypeScript and JavaScript. I'm just going to go ahead and stick with good old regular JavaScript. And then this is going to start building our app. And then once this is done, you're going to notice that we get a message here in our console saying create your pre-configured app in Miro by clicking on the following link. So actually, what I'm going to do is copy this directly. And if your browser is set up correctly, you can also just click on this when you hold Command in VS Code or Terminal. I'm going to go back to my browser here, and using this link, it's going to actually take me directly to my Miro Developer App settings. And in a second here, we'll see a pop-up letting us know like how to go about creating our app. And it's going to automatically populate some of the details that we already just used in the terminal. So here we can see that our app name is already populated. It says June webinar. And then I'm going to select a team within my Miro account that I want to authorize this app under or create this app under. And just a quick note, if you had just created a Miro account and you didn't have like a developer team or anything yet, which is one of our prerequisites, this flow would have actually first asked you to create a developer team with just one click, and then it would have automatically brought you to this next page. I already have one, so we didn't see that, but just calling it out in case anyone does this and they see that extra step. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create app. And this is going to bring us to our developer app settings for the app that we're creating. And there's a lot of information on this page, but the thing that we're most interested in is really in the top half here. So first, every developer app is going to have its own unique set of credentials. And this is just client ID and a client secret for you to keep just for this app. And then below that, we have the app URL field. And this app URL field is really the most important field for configuring a Web SDK app. And because we used the npx create-miro command, this was automatically populated for us and selected localhost 3000 as our local dev environment. And that's where our app's going to be like hosted locally for today's purposes. But if you were creating a more sophisticated app and you wanted to do something on production, then you would provide the URL of where you actually are hosting that app in this app URL space. Below that, we have a redirect URL field, but that's only if you're using the REST API. So we're not going to get into that today. And then the last thing I want to show you here is the permissions section. So this is the scopes of, basically what can the app that you're developing access on behalf of users. So I'm just going to select boards read and boards write, which is already selected for me based off of this boilerplate we've created. And this just means that the app we're developing is going to have access to, create, delete, update, and read items on a Miro board. So any user who authorizes this app should have that expectation. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is going to go ahead and actually just install this app under my account. And I'm going to select this June webinar team that I'll be using it under and hit add. And here we can see that our app has been installed. And if we were using the REST API or something like that, then you might want to take advantage of this access token as well, but we don't need to worry about that for today's purposes. All right, so now that we have our app configured, we can go ahead and open up this project in our code editor. So I'm going to go back to my code editor, and I'm just going to open up this project real quick. And voila. So we see here that we've got a bunch of boilerplate files that were just created using the npx create-miro-app command. And it generated this whole project for us. It created a source folder with some JavaScript files, as well as some HTML files. And now what I want to do is actually get this project up and running. So I'm going to open up my terminal once more here right within my code editor. And I'm just going to double check that I'm in the right folder. I am, and now I'm going to run npm run start. And now my project should be up and running on localhost. So I'm going to go back to the browser and just check out localhost to make sure this is running. And you can see actually it is. We've got this kind of classic boilerplate text up letting us know that our project is up and running successfully. So we've got our project up and running locally. Next, we want to make sure that we can actually launch this from within a Miro board, not just on localhost. So how do we do this? Well, let's take it a few steps further. So after we've authorized and installed our app under our account, as we did from the app settings page just a moment ago, there are a few other things for us to take note of to be able to launch our app from within a Miro board. So first, note that apps built with the Web SDK are launched from the left-hand toolbar, and this is accessible from within any open Miro board. However, to ensure that an app you've created actually appears here in the toolbar, there's a few things we just need to double check. First is to make sure that our app is up and running. Second, we want to ensure that it's subscribed to the icon click event for the Web SDK, which I'll show in just a second. And third, we want to confirm that it's been authorized and installed under the team to which our open Miro board belongs. So if all three of these things are true, then our app should appear in the left-hand toolbar when it's fully extended. And I'll walk through all of these requirements right now. So first, let's cover the icon click event detailed in our reference docs for the Web SDK. So in order for an app to be accessible from the left-hand toolbar, it must be subscribed to this event. And if it's not, then it's going to be considered a headless app of sorts. And so it won't appear to end users in Miro, and there will be no icon for them to click on to launch the app from the toolbar. But if you're using the create-miro-app command to generate your app like we recommend, and like I just did here, then the icon click event is actually already included in the index.js file by default. So there's no additional action necessary, just raising this in case you were to create an app from like absolute scratch. But let me go ahead and show you where this is exactly in our project. So if we go to the source folder and we go to index.js, you'll see here that we have this listener that is listening to the icon click event. And when that happens, it's going to open the panel. And if you want more details on how this works in depth, you can also go directly to our developer docs. And if you just go to the Web SDK portion of our developer documentation, give this just a moment to load. There we go. So if we go to our Web SDK section and we just type in icon, you'll actually see that you can check this first tutorial, which is adding icon click to your app. And this details all of the steps that I just walked through, explaining that you need this event in order to launch an app. So that is the icon click event. Now, so now that we've confirmed that we have this event listener, icon click, we already have our app up and running, and it's been installed under our account, we should be able to access this from the left-hand toolbar. So let's go into a Miro board and actually check this out. All right, so I'm going to go to the team that I authorized this under. I'm going to go into a test board, delete some of the content that's already there. And then you'll see over here on the left-hand side, we've got this plus button on the left-hand toolbar, and there's actually like a little blue dot above it. And this, signifies that there's like something new to see. So this blue dot won't necessarily always be there. And then even within here, we've got our June webinar app that we created, which also has a nice little blue dot to let us know that it's new. And so if we click on this, this is going to launch our app. And so what you just saw was like the default functionality where a sticky note was created when we launched the app. But we're going to go ahead and modify this and give it our own special twist and add drag and drop. But before I do that, I'll just give a moment to make sure everyone's following along okay. And if you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. Or if you're lost at this point, let us know. And we can revisit some of this towards the end as well. But we're going to keep moving right along. So back to our slides here. The next thing I'd like to do is, so far we've bootstrapped a basic Miro app from the command line using the create-miro-app command, and we've launched, it from within a Miro board. But now I want to take it one step further and add some more dynamic functionality from the Web SDK to our app, as well as a bit of styling. So let's start with adding the necessary methods to implement drag and drop. So a quick note about drag and drop, like why you might want to implement something like this. Well, it's a really good example of how you could organize assets such as like images, text, etc. On a board. And while I'm going to demo a basic implementation of this today, you can imagine as well the opportunity to import assets from a third party and display them here, like in your app panel. Basically, you could create something like your own kind of asset manager to have all of your favorite images or text or whatever kind of waiting for you on the ready. And then you could drag them onto your board as you see. So now to start organizing our drag and drop app I first want to handle some basic layout. And rather than just throwing images or text just anywhere on our app panel, I want to leverage some of the pre-built layouts that are available in our CSS library, Miro Tone. So if I go to the next slide here, Miro Tone is, our out-of-the-box CSS library, which offers all sorts of great components and templates for you to use. And I'm just going to walk through this quickly now. So, we have our app.html open on the other side of my code editor. And what I want to do is within this app.html, you're going to see that we have a lot of like boilerplate kind of text here. So if I go ahead and actually just remove some of this boilerplate and hit save, and then I go back to our app, you're going to see now I just have kind of a blank canvas here. So we've removed some of the like generic stuff that was just created by default. And I'm going to go to mirotone.xyz. And this is where our CSS library lives and its documentation. So you can find all sorts of different components here and styling methods. It's a great place to make sure that you're using components that are already kind of styled in the Miro personality. And so your app feels kind of cohesive with that experience. But for today's purpose, I'm just going to use a simple layout. I'm going to go down to icon template. And here you can see this is just a basic kind of HTML set of HTML elements that will help us organize the content on our app, similar to how you see these like shadow icons here. And this is just, an easy way to lay out some of what you're going to do. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and copy this directly from our Miro Tone library. I'm going to bring it over here into my app.html. And this is going to be a great starting point for the content that I'm about to add. And so I'm going to go ahead and just start adding some text. And I'm going to copy a few different versions of this so that we have a few different ones to work with. So if we hit save and we go back to our app, you'll see we've got these texts in different parts of the grid. And now the next thing I'm going to do is actually add some images as well. So if we go back to our code, and then in these other sections, I'm just going to add an image here from a URL. This is just like a static URL that is hosting an image. So I'll add a few of these. And we'll go back to our app. And we can see we've got some text, we've got some images, kind of following this grid formation. Of course, we could make this, much more visually appealing, but this is just to kind of give you a sense of, how you can lay these out. The problem is right now they're not doing anything. They're just kind of sitting there, but I can't drag them, I can't drop them or anything like that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually add the functionality that implements drag and drop. And we can do this in two parts. So back to our slides here. There's two specific things we want to do in order to implement drag and drop. The first is we want to add an HTML class called Miro Draggable to any element that we want to be able to drag onto the board. So if we add this class, it'll let our web SDK know that, okay, this item should be draggable. That's the first step. And then the second step is we need to add an event listener for the drop event to make sure that when we actually drag and drop, that the web SDK knows to be listening for this event and thus execute on that kind of functionality. So let's go back to our app. And the first thing I'm going to do is add the Miro Draggable class to all the elements that I want to be able to drag. So Miro Draggable, I've added it to this first text element, and then I'm just going to add it to the images as well. So class equals, oops. Add it to this text as well. I think you get the idea here. Let's see. All right, and then I think I've just got one more image over here that I want to add this to. Okay, so we've added this class to all of the items that we want to be able to drag. And so now if we go back to our app, we should see an icon kind of letting us know that it's draggable, but not yet because we actually haven't done the second part, which is to add the event listener. So that's what we're going to do next. So if we go to our Web SDK documentation once more, and if we go to the add drag and drop to your app tutorial, you'll see a rundown of all the steps we've taken so far. But the next step that we need to do is within app.js. And this is to add the listener for the drag and drop functionality. So what this is saying, this snippet here is basically, when you drop an element, take note of the position and the content of that HTML element, and then take some kind of action. So in this case, it's creating a sticky note. So I'm going to actually go ahead and copy this snippet directly. And then I'm going to go back to our source folder, go to our app.js, and I'm going to comment out all this boilerplate functionality. And I'm going to paste in this snippet directly from our tutorial. And again, just to recap, this is an event listener listening for the drop event for when we actually drag and drop, and is taking note of the position and the target content. So here, the create sticky note method that we have inside of this listener is just one of our Web SDK methods. So within our Web SDK documentation, if you go to our reference, you're going to notice that there's all sorts of different items and whatnot. So if we were to go to sticky note, you can see here that we have this method to create a sticky note. And that's the same thing we're doing here, just on a little bit of a simpler scale. So with this in mind, I'm going to go ahead and go back to our board and just see what happens. So as of right now, if we drag and drop a text element, then we should be able to actually see a sticky note created when we drag it onto the board. So let's go back to our app. And if we click on some text and drag it, you'll see the text is now displayed as a sticky note, which is pretty cool. So we can grab any of our text items and drag them onto the board, and we get the content of that text as a sticky note. But what happens if we do it with an image? Well, if we do it with an image, we're just getting a blank sticky note. And that's because within our code, we're doing the content that's actually being put into the sticky note is this text content, and our images don't have any text content. If we remember correctly, our images just have this source URL. So what we can do instead is we can come up with a little bit of logic that says, hey, if I'm text, create a sticky note. And if not, if I'm an image, then just create an image using the source URL. So that's what we're going to do now. So what we'll do is just create a basic if statement. So I'm going to add a few lines of code here and say if the item that we're targeting is an HTML element that is an image, which is this snippet right here, then I want you to do something. So within this next chunk here, we're going to perform some kind of action. Otherwise, I'll add an else. Otherwise, I want you to do something else. And the something else is going to be the create sticky note for the text elements. I'm going to put that right in here. And so now we've got this condition where if there's an image, I want you to do X. Otherwise, I want you to do Y. And because we only have two item types, we have text and we have an image, then this is not very complicated. And so we can just have an if else statement. But if we had more item types besides images and text, then we would need a bit more conditional logic. So to wrap this up, what I'm going to do is within the condition for the image, I'm going to add a little bit of code from the Miro Web SDK to actually create an image based on the source URL of that HTML element. So I'm just pasting in a snippet directly from our documentation. So this is the create image method. We go back to our docs and we go to the image type within the Web SDK. This is the exact same Web SDK method that I'm using right here in our code. So this is miro.board.createImage. We pass a URL and a position, and it'll create that on the Miro board. So what I'm doing here is saying that when I drag and drop an image, I want you to read the source URL of the image. and take note of the position that we dragged and dropped it to and create an image. Otherwise, if it's not an image, then it must be text. And I want you to create a sticky note based off of that text. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. We're going to go back to our board here. And I'm going to delete all the stuff we have here so far. And we'll see first, if we drag some text, it creates a sticky note. And now if we drag an image, it should create an image. Pretty cool, right? So now instead of getting that blank sticky note, we have some logic in our app to say, hey, this is not like a piece of text, this is an image, so create an image instead. So this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg for how you can start manipulating the methods in the Web SDK to perform, actions based on how you want your app to perform. So of course, this is just scratching the surface of, what's possible when it comes to leveraging the power of the Web SDK. But for today's purposes, I've kept it quite simple. There are a ton of different methods in our Web SDK documentation available for you to use, kind of like I was showing before. You can do things with cards, app cards, images, sticky notes, shapes. The list, kind of goes on. And for many of these, we even have the sample code snippets, right there in the documentation that are needed for like a really effortless kind of development experience. So, I know that some of you might have some questions, or maybe you're running into like issues doing this step by step, but we also have a number of like comprehensive trainings that you'll be able to like rewind and go through. But if you're trying to follow along now and you're, having a bit of trouble doing it like end to end, don't worry, you can definitely join our Discord and I'll be happy to kind of walk any of you through this, like kind of step by step and help you get something up and running. So with that in mind, I'll shift gears here a little bit more. And I'd actually like to start talking about, what else is possible and, what other people have done in the past. So, rather than continue to walk through individual methods in our Web SDK and our documentation, I'll just take a moment to share some inspiration from existing members of the Miro developer community. So first, we have the story of a veteran who's built two amazing apps that maybe you've actually used yourself. One is Super Search and the other is Easy Translator. And he built both of these using our Web SDK. And he's really, he's just a true success story for maximizing our capabilities to complement end users' experiences of working in Miro. And both Easy Translator and Super Search are just two awesome apps that I definitely encourage you to check out to get an even better picture of kind of, what you can build with our Web SDK. Next, we have Max Harper, founder of Refractive Strategy, and he actually leads a team that builds on Miro full-time with our Web SDK and a few other capabilities as well. So another early adopter, Max has built several apps and plugins on the Miro platform, like Power Pack and the Colors plugin that's available as part of it. And his creations are just another great example of, how custom apps can empower really specific workflows and leverage, custom logic to elevate end users' experiences in Miro. But for, both of these developers from our community who, put their time and effort into the Miro Developer Platform, there are other opportunities as well that, have been presented to them. And for example, like Vedran has written a blog post on his journey about building on the platform and shared his experience about monetizing his apps. You can actually read the full story on our Miro engineering blog. And then we can see another example in Max, whose story has been featured in our newsletter. He was also present at our distributed session last year, doing his own session. So just to give you a sense of what some of these other community developers have done, some of them are working on Miro as part of their business. Some of them are building things to solve problems that, they couldn't fix alone with the native Miro functionality. But what's the gist here? Like, what am I getting at? I think it's just that, you can do so much with the platform, and we love to share stories from, our community that display the power of Miro. But ultimately, both of these developers built apps that focused on like somewhat common requests from members of the Miro end user community. So if you're looking for ideas to get started on an app of your own, our community wish list is actually a great place to start. So if you're curious where to find that, you can actually go to community.miro.com. And here you're going to see a bunch of different options. We also have our developer forum where you can ask questions about things like this webinar or creating your first app, whatever it might be. But then the wish list is specifically a place where you can go and you can actually rank to see, what items have gotten the most votes. And a lot of these ideas could be really unique things to consider building on our platform. And yeah, so that just to give you a sense of, what could be possible and what might inspire you. So to, kind of start rounding things out, a quick look back at what we've explored so far. So we touched on each of these, few things, from an overview of the platform and our web SDK to, how to set up a local environment and bootstrap an app from the command line. We launched an app from the Miro toolbar. We implemented drag and drop and used some Miro tone layouts. And then we talked a little bit about community. So if you're feeling inspired, then I hope you're ready to come build something with us and really get your hands dirty. You can leverage all the resources of our developer community. You can find me on the Miro for Developers Discord server, following this QR code, or just type in Miro for Developers Discord in Google and you'll find it quite easily. I think we've got a link in the chat as well. And it's a great place to, just like chat, get inspiration, find support, get feedback on an idea you might have, anything like that. And yeah, with that, I would love to take a moment to see what questions we've had so far and open it up to answering some of those.